I recently used the Samsung S25, a great small flagship that was a solid phone, but a little slippery. After that, I went directly to this, the Samsung Galaxy S21, and for some reason, I like it more. Now, I'm serious, but also not, as clearly the S25 is the better phone, but in my opinion, using this without a case felt more natural. That doesn't mean there's no faults for this phone. For one, the design is cheap. For some reason, Samsung used everything Gorilla Glass Victus for the front and plastic on the back. This ended up being the only non-FE or light Samsung S that had a plastic back, as of the S26 at least. On the back, which does dent, scratch, and crack, it curves, but also has a cutout for the plastic flash, while the camera glasses are glass, like I just said. But around this is aluminum. This curves into the frame, which is also a shiny aluminum that goes all the way around the phone with two mics on the top, nothing on the left side, while the right side has the volume and power buttons, and the bottom has the SIM tray, no SD card here, a microphone, the USB-C 3.2 port, and the bottom loudspeaker that pairs with the earpiece for a stereo feel that sounds good enough. What's funny is my bottom speaker was actually broken and I didn't really notice this, and I still thought that the audio was great. Then the front, like I said, is Gorilla Glass Victus, and this covers the 6.2-inch flexible AMOLED screen, which sits at 1080p for the screen resolution and 120Hz for the refresh rate. Even when compared to the Samsung S25, the screen still looks great nowadays, even if it is only 1080p. The kind of small screen size helps it get the 421 pixels per inch, while brightness hits about 400-ish nits in manual mode, while auto brightness can bump up to about 850 nits. Not really sure how they get that 1300 nits other than in direct sunlight, maybe? There is a hole punch for the front camera, and on the bottom is the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner, and mine is essentially unusable because I have a screen protector on. And yeah, you've heard this over and over again because the design is almost exactly the same as the S20 to the S25, besides the fact that the S20 was a 1440p screen. Really, besides the S26, the screen somewhat stays the same, going 0.1 inches up or down, and just getting brighter the newer the S model you get. While the design of the phone slightly changes, the overall goal of the phone still stays the same and makes the jump to the S25 or S26 just a faster phone, really. That said, the Snapdragon 888 chip in here is still solid, generally paired with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of UFS 3.1 storage. There is a 256GB version, but I doubt anyone really buys those, especially in the US. Even though it is running Android 15 and is done getting updates, this phone is still solid. I use this after the S25, like I said, and yes, I do notice that it is a little bit slower than the S25, and the S25 feels a little bit smoother, but not by much. Even though the S25 is almost 3 times faster on paper compared to the S21, real-life usage shows otherwise. Even with gaming, this is still a solid phone for even demanding titles, of course at the cost of getting pretty hot and draining the battery. The battery life is fine given it is a 5-year-old phone, but you should be replacing the battery when you do buy one. The back adhesive and the fact that it is plastic will make that job easier, and I'm not even going to let you think that these phones are truly IP68 water resistant anymore, even though they claim that they are. Anyways, here's the performance of my old battery, and it is borderline terrible, but still getting through the day is possible. It is strange that this 4000 mAh cell is the same as the S24 and S25, but for some reason the S22 and S23 were 3700 and 3900 mAh cells respectively. What never changed was the 25 watts of wired charging, 15 watts of wireless, and the ability to reverse wireless charge, meaning the battery and charging is the same as the S25 and the S26, with the latter having the 4300 mAh cell. Then the last parts are 5G ultra-wideband on the US version. The Exynos 2100 didn't get this, just regular 5G, but everyone gets Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0. It has a strange vibrating motor that works fine, but the plastic back kind of makes that vibrating motor a little bit cheaper feeling. It's honestly wild that this is the tallest and heaviest base S series since 2020 at 171 grams and 5.97 inches tall, but it isn't too far off the S26. The plastic back makes the phone feel cheap, and that kind of sucks. Besides that, this is a flagship device that was $800 new, while the S20 was $1,000 new. I guess that back glass cost another $200. The biggest difference from the other S series is the cameras. It wasn't until the S22/S23 where they started keeping essentially the same cameras moving forward, and this actually has a much different main and telephoto camera, while the front and ultrawide are essentially the same cameras. The front is that 10 megapixel focusable sensor that's similar to the Samsung that started it with the S10 series, but with a worse aperture, as in they downgraded it from f1.9 to f2.2. Regardless, it's a solid sensor that produces some nice shots and, more importantly, focused shots. And even does 4K at 60 frames per second, just like the S10. The back has a not focusable 12 megapixel ultrawide camera that pairs with the main sensor as well, but I didn't like it personally. There's no macro mode here, which isn't a surprise and copies the S26 as that also has no macro mode. Then the main camera is another 12 megapixel sensor that is optically stabilized and still looks pretty good today. This was the last one before the 50 megapixel cameras, but as is, it was a great 1/1.76 inch sensor. Then the last one is a weird 64 megapixel telephoto camera, but also isn't. This is a 1.1 times optical zoom and creates a hybrid 3 times zoom that still looks good but relies on sensor cropping rather than having optical clarity from a dedicated sensor like they did before and after with the S10 and S21. This is actually what allows for 8K 24 frames per second video looking like a 10 to 20% crop over that 4K 60 frames per second video, but this was during the times when phones had 8K video and no one expected anyone to actually use it. Overall, I think this is a solid camera set, but having a 29mm max for the optical clarity is weird to see on a phone that claims to have a telephoto sensor in the first place. But you can be the judge as to if these cameras hold up today, but for me, I still think that they're great. The 64 megapixel telephoto camera era was a weird time. And that's pretty much it. In a way, that's kind of a good thing. This compares to something like the iPhone 13, but I personally like this more. The lack of newer software updates can be frustrating for some, but this also lacks the AI features of the S22 and newer, which I know that some people would actually love that fact. That said, Android 15 won't be an issue for at least 2 or 3 years, if not 5 or more years. For those using this phone as a social media scroller, this will work just fine, with the only issues that you might be running into being processing things in the background or machine learning type of applications. As for repairability, this can be difficult for some, but the cost of the repairs are pretty cheap and, like I said, easy to do because of the plastic back. I mean, besides the screen, everything costs less than $15 to buy, but the screen is a little bit over $100, assuming that you get an original one. That said, so was the phone used. At over $100, personally, I would recommend going with the S22 or S23, but I got this phone dirt cheap and I loved using it. I can't say the same for the S20 series though. And that's my review of the Samsung S21, the older flagship with weird cameras. But let me know what you think. Are Android 15 phones older than Earth itself? Let me know, and as always, thanks for joining the 1%, and thanks for watching.